Hey, good morning, everyone, or good day.
Hello. Let's get started. Um, so I see Lexi is here, and I'm trying to find the questions. Um, I'm happy to uh, co moderate today, or I can moderate, and Jasenia, if you want to um, answer questions along with Lexi, that totally works. But everyone here is it's really great. So honestly, I think this would be a good kind of just open conversation with the five of us here. Um, and then hopefully some of more folks join.
Yeah, there's usually a delay, but we can get kick started.
Yeah. So um, yeah, welcome to the December OpenSSF DEI Working Group Community Office Hours. Today's topic is standing out in the job market with your brand. Um, I think we're going to be, this is really targeting like job seekers or people considering transitioning careers or positions, and also just in general, overall good practices for like keeping your brand and your kind of portfolio up to date. So, hi, Lexi. Um, how about we start with quick introductions? Lexi, I'd like to hand it over to you first.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Lexi B. I have the honor and opportunity to work at Microsoft with Yesenia. So when she invited me to this, I was very, very excited. I have worked in big tech my whole career since graduating from college, working at some of the largest consumer-based companies, not on purpose. Not on purpose brand wise, but definitely looking back at it now, definitely see the positives and sometimes negatives of that. And I'm very big on career branding. I think, especially as women, especially as brown and black women, your bills don't get paid unless you have a brand. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, and I'm, yes, like I said, I'm one of the co-leads for the OpenSSF DEI working group. And echoing off what Lexi had mentioned, branding for me has been one thing that I had to learn. I'm a security engineer. I'm an engineer at heart, a developer. And as I was transitioning into different roles, and I've worked with very, very big major tech companies, I realized that I had to create a brand so that they can know who I was before I entered the door, and what I brought to the table, to help essentially negotiate myself into it before I was granted the position. So, yeah, happy to be here to talk about things that I've learned and share this knowledge with folks on here and the future interwebs on YouTube.
Yeah, thank you both for the quick intro. I'll just jump right into it. So, what does it mean to have your own brand? I think some people might not even know exactly what that means for them and how how you start that, right?
Well, you have a brand whether or not you're being strategic about it, which is why it's very important to be strategic about it. And a brand can be as simple as I'm going to use Steve Jobs as an example. One of the big things in his brand when he was alive is that he only wore black turtlenecks and dad jeans and like New Balances. And that's all he wore. And everybody knew that. It became the joke of the Silicon Valley. There were many times when he was in interviews trying to talk about new software for Apple, and they were like, let's discuss the wardrobe that looks like you haven't showered, right? And then he'd respond and he'd be like, I have showered. I just have like 85,000 black turtlenecks and 200,000 dad jeans. And he explained that that was his thing because he did not want to have to think about those things in the morning. So that is something as simple as a brand. That was a very strategic move on his part, but clearly it grabbed a lot of attention from the press and from people in the Silicon Valley and all the tech nerds out there. But you have a brand whether you like it or not. Your brand at work can be the things that people joke with you. It can be Karen is always 5 minutes early to a meeting. That is part of your brand, right? It can be Yesenia has a penguin tattoo. That is part of your brand. And so what I would like to see Black and Brown women do is understand that regardless if you want it or not, you have a brand. It is how people see you. It is how people receive you. It is how people work with you. And it's about time that you use that to your advantage and start strategically building your brand because it's going to be there regardless if you want it or not.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point because for those that know me, I just dyed my hair black, or I reset my factory settings and went back to my natural hair color. But for the longest time, for the last 3 to 4 years, I've had red hair. So for my brand, they saw me as red. Miss Red, Miss Little Mermaid, Miss Deadpool, and then the Lady of the Penguin. And those are things that kind of just grow with you. And you have to think of it, one, from a unique perspective of who you are, as well as um, strategically, right? Like Steve Jobs did that to reduce the decisions he had to make. I did it because I love the color red and I was tired of my black hair, right? And that just kind of catches on now. Now they got to come up with another nickname for me. But for more on a personal level, like for me, I chose the brand name Cyber Hudetera because I'm a cybersecurity professional who does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I've seen that spread out where when I post on LinkedIn, I'll be posting both the stuff that I do in cybersecurity that I'm able to talk about, as well as a lot of my jujitsu things that I work on. And I've gone to conferences and they're like, "Oh, you're the cyber jujitsu lady." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." So you'd be surprised by the little things that you might be sharing that's very unique to who you are and your own character that will be picked up, and folks are going to start setting up your brand essentially in their eyes.
Yeah, thank you both. I think that really shows all of the very different and personal ways that brand can kind of that we can manifest this brand, right? Sort of put ourselves out there and sort of showing that. And I think it also transitions well into the next question about like how do you implement your brand? And I know Jasenia, you already touched on it a little bit, and Lexi did as well. But can you like dive a bit deeper into that?
Yeah, I'll kick that one off. There's two things that I usually recommend for folks that are looking to figure out what their brand. One is message your friends and your family and people that know you and ask them for 5 words. Like if you think of me, what are the 5 things that come up? Lexi, for example, thought of my penguin tattoo. Um, ask them that. And then the other one is think of who you want to be and what you want to be in this life. So who's your best self? What does your best self look like? How does your best self act? How does your best self show up in these different ecosystems? And start figuring out how to adjust yourself into that new space. And then Lexi.
I think the biggest thing is to know what you're good at. And I love Yesenia's advice about asking family and friends. I think that's also part of your brand. But from a professional brand perspective, know what actually makes you money. And it's actually not your day job. It's not the job that you do that makes you money. It's how in which you do it. So I always tell people go back to all of your performance reviews and see the alignment of all the positive things that people say about you. And they're probably very similar or the same thing. So when I was in my early 20s and I was trying to build a brand a very long time ago, and I started thinking about the compliments that I receive in hallway passing. This is pre-COVID because I'm very old. It's also the things that my boss said about me, the things that my director said about me. It's also the things that people don't like about me. And I realized very quickly that the things that some people love about me are the same things that some people can't stand about me. And then I had to start taking some stock in wanting in recognizing and defining who I am for me. Because I'm very big, especially for Black and Brown folks, like we should not be defining ourselves based on the white gaze. So once I had all that information, I took a lot of time to decide, who do I want to be? When I look in the mirror, who do I want to be? And then when I put all those things together, I was like, oh, so I actually enjoy being the person in the room that says the truth. I enjoy being the person in the room that is just like, so what's really going on? I'm good at it. I can make money off of it. There are some people who are not going to like it, and that's totally okay. But that is the brand that I want to put out there. Right. So I think that if you do those steps, but it's so much bigger than figuring out what people say about you, that's important because you need to know how people receive you in the world. You also have to start taking some really deep inner work on who you want to be in this world. And I do not think that Western society prepares you for that work. It is a lot of work, but I highly recommend you start doing it, like figuring out, here are the traits about me that I love. Here are the traits about me that I love and that I bring into the workplace. Here's some things that I want to work on. And that should really come from like your interpersonal, deep, dark circles of your spirit. And then through that, align that with the other things that people say about you that are positive. That's your brand. But remember, your brand is not what you do, it's how you do it. People do not get hired because of what they do, they get hired and they are remembered for how they do it.
That's a really big thing. And to continue on that, like just from what you're saying, Lexi, integrity to yourself is like the biggest thing for your brand. So at the end of the day, and this is just overall life, you only have yourself, right? You'll have your family, your friends. Um, but integrity to yourself and who you want to be helps, especially in the cases where as Alexia mentioned, there might be things that are your superheroes, that superpower that rubs people the wrong way, and they might just not be the people that need to be in your life. I mean, there's work, and sometimes you're kind of forced to work with the people, and you got to figure out how to play in the playpen. But integrity to yourself is one of the big things to the brand, is who you want to be, and make sure that you show up as that person every single day.
Yeah. And I think to your point, it can be very challenging sometimes because we unfortunately don't work in a vacuum. Sometimes we wish we did, right? But yeah, it comes down almost to this showing up authentically to work, right? And yeah, I really like where you two have gone with this, where it's like, well, take advantage of your uniqueness, understand how others see you, and um, then go with it and sort of let that flourish. So, yeah, I think going back to my questions. Yeah, so um, we've already touched on standing out in the job market, but and even the authenticity piece. What are some other approaches that you normally take to stand out, either in a job interview or in a resume, right? Because in a resume, you might not necessarily put some of these personal or kind of, yeah, just some of these personal aspects about yourself.
Once you start playing with your brand and understand that a brand, just like evolution, just like the human experience, is always changing and flowing. There is no like, oh, and on Monday my brand is built, like that's not a thing, right? And actually I highly recommend people, if they're really being strategic about building a brand, I highly recommend people to start actually doing some research in how some of the world's most profitable brands have been built. One of my favorite books is Shoe Dog. It's by the guy who started Nike. Do not agree with his politics, but I highly recommend you paying $20 and buying that book. He really goes into detail of how Nike was created, and you really get to learn the inner workings of what does it look like to build a very strategic brand. Another good person to follow, and not just follow her on Instagram, but actually do some research, is Beyonce. Not Beyonce the performer, Beyonce the brand. It's very, very strategic, right? And if you can start following these things, like even like the making of McDonald's and like how the brand got there. I am a documentary nerd. There's a great movie starring Michael Keaton, I think it's on Netflix, but don't quote me, that talks about how McDonald's became what it is today. And Michael Keaton plays the CEO of McDonald's. Fun fact, McDonald's was never supposed to be this. And so it was started by this family, and then he took it and he was like, wait a minute, this can be bigger than what you ever expect, right? So, really, if you really want to build a brand, I highly recommend just doing some research while you're scrolling on your phone at night before you go to bed, because these people and these things that have built brands, it was very strategic, and you can use the same model for yourself. So, that's the first thing. The second thing with that is that a brand does not exist unless people know about it. And people forget that. So you can make your brand in a silo, but if you don't start going to work and speaking your truth about your brand and acting and performing in that brand, if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, did it fall? It did not fall. That's how capitalism works. And so it's very important for you to start performing in that brand. So if part of your brand is you're the person who always is data driven, you come to meetings with data, you make decisions based on data, then you should be starting to go to meetings with that data. And you should make that very clear. Based on the data, this is my opinion on this. What's going to happen is if you continue to do that, people at work are going to be like, oh, Marcella, she going to bring her spreadsheet. Like, she not playing with y'all. Okay. Right? And that's where the brand is built. And then finally, you need to start using outside external places such as LinkedIn, such as your Instagram. You don't have to become an Instagram influencer. I'm not promoting that or suggesting that, but other people need to know that you exist, because you can have this amazing brand internally at work. But when it comes to using your brand for job security, other people in the world need to know that it exists. I have a friend of mine who told me in my mid 20s, she said, Lexi, I don't have a traditional career goal. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, my lifelong career goal is to never have to interview for a job again. And I literally took that advice and I was like, bet, copy, paste. And so at 27, 28, I was like, if I build my brand correctly, I will never have to, I will always have to interview, or else that's illegal. But I will never have to put a resume in the job market again. And that has always been my career goal. I want people to call me. I'm not trying to be one of 50,000 resumes. I want people to call me. Am I 100% there? No. Am I happy to say that I'm a good 80%? Yeah. And so that's one of the reasons behind my brand, is that my job security hinges on I do not want to have to resume a job. I want to be minding my business, black, lotioned, and blessed, and someone call me or go in my LinkedIn DMs and say, let's talk about a job. Everyone's why is different. So those are the three things. One, start performing it at work so people can talk about you in the best way. Also, be okay for people not to like it. There are some people that are not going to like Marcella's spreadsheets. And guess what? That's okay, right? But stand in your truth. Two, start telling people outside of your job that this is your brand. So back to picking on Marcella and her, hypothetical data, like that's what she does. She loves data. She uses data to make decisions, right? And then three, define your why. Why is this brand important to you? And what do you actually want out of it? And for me, it was, I want to be able to not have to go look for a job ever again. So, yeah.
I love that. I wrote that down. I was like, that's what I need. And it's interesting because the last two jobs, like Microsoft and the Linux Foundation, was I didn't my brands and my network helped me. Or it wasn't like I was actively searching. It was somebody messaged me and like, hey, look, I found this. I think you'd be super cool for this. Go apply. And then, they gave referrals. Um, and it's interesting because my brand, when I originally started, a feedback that I got a lot was I wasn't technical enough, which was interesting because I have a bachelor's in computer science, a master's in digital forensics, and at that point was 6 years in the cyber industry. So I was like, I don't know what you mean by I'm not technical. How? Like I was writing software, but I wasn't presenting myself in that because at work I wasn't able to talk about what I did outside. So I had to figure out a way to present myself in a technical aspect that reflected the skills that I brought. Over years, that kind of grew. And the one thing that I like to think about is when it comes to my brand, there's five things, right? There's 5 points, and you can use this also when you are sharing out into the world different things. So for me personally, you'll always see me talking about women empowerment, self-defense, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, cybersecurity, and coming into cyber, and all the fun things that I might be working on that I'm allowed to talk about. Resiliency is a really big one for me, and leadership. And I took this, and honestly, from the role that I was in, Linux Foundation, um, there was a point where I was the engineering budget was cut, so I was no longer with a job. And my thing was on LinkedIn, people lose their jobs, and when they reshare and they do that open for work post, I see a lot of pity. I see a lot of like pity me, victim, like I need a job, get me a job, this and this and this. And I honestly, it's actually, I think one of the most posts that has the most impressions that I did. But instead of doing that, I took two of my branding points, leadership and resiliency, and I marketed myself. I was like, hey, I'm a free agent, thinking because I think it was basketball season or something, or basketball was starting. So I was like, hey guys, I'm a free agent. Here are my superpowers. Here are the things that I can do. Reach out to me. And that kind of blew up, and it opened the opportunity for those DMs to come in and be like, hey, let's talk. Sharing also the fact that I do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. You have no idea how many polite DMs I get from folks that just want to connect with me in the industry. And they're like, oh, you do cybersecurity and jujitsu? You should come join my team. I actually interviewed for a company where the whole team was like jujitsu folks. So take that into consideration that when you do these posts and looking for or open for a job, take your branding into that and reflect who you want to. Have your friends look over it and make sure that it's reflecting a positive, healed nature, not something that folks are going to be like, okay, am I supposed to pity you? Am I supposed to like, you never want people to feel that way unless that's part of your brand and that's what you want them to think of. Um, and then just for another sake, because of the resiliency and the leadership that I've implemented into my own brand and how I show up to work, in one of my previous roles, I worked in like a large organization and we were pushing out a lot of security initiatives. So people would just get upset. People get upset with security professionals for some reason. It's like they call us the police. But it was funny because that role they used to call us the cops because of the way our team name was. It actually, if you broke it down, it was cops. Um, so they used to actually bring me into the calls, and it became more like, oh, Jasenia's in this call, and everyone's all kind and happy, and no one's like arguing and fighting. So they would bring me into the calls to reduce the tension of it. Because my brand and because of who I am and how I approach things, that they're like, okay, we know that we can bring in her. Your superpower is to like calm down the forces. Let's use her and do that for them. So those are so think about like how you, as Lexian mentioned before, how you show up. Think about what your 5 points are. Like if you want to break it down into five buckets, or like if someone were to define you, what those five pieces are, and you can start with there.
Yeah, thank you both. We had a question in our original planning that was literally titled, "How do you hack the online job apps cycle?" Which is very impersonal, right? Very can be very overwhelming, and I think we touched on a lot of those points around it's really more about the networks you build and the things that you do that are outside of the box, as it were, right? To that make you stand out and do that. So I'm kind of curious how I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A or just kind of open discussion. Um, what are sort of 3 tips that you would give someone looking to build their brand? Like if you had to distill it down, I know Lexi already talked about the research and the authentic showing up as your authentic self. Are there any other tips essentially that you would want to share that you have not mentioned?
Well, let me challenge that real quick. I never said show up to work as your authentic self. I don't believe in that. This is capitalism.
Okay,
I do not believe in that. What I
okay,
do
fair enough.
believe, and hear me out, I do not think that you showing up as a different person is healthy. It's going to burn you out in the inside and actually does not help any type of freedom movement to liberation for people who are oppressed. So I'm not saying show up as someone different. What I always tell people is I'm like, I think the term code switching has gotten co-opted in a negative term. And now we have people assuming that when I say code switch, I'm saying be closer to whiteness, be closer to the majority of power if you are not in that group. That is actually inaccurate. So what I tell folks is I'm like, look, how you talk to your mom, I hope is different than how you talk to your man or your woman. And I hope that's different than how you talk to your sister. I hope it's different than how you talk to your grandparents. I hope how you show up to a family dinner is different than how you would show up with you and your friends at a concert. I really do. And if not, that's frankly just weird to me. That is not saying that you are different people, but you know your audience, right? When you get on the phone and you are calling your closest friend and you're just, having a great conversation for an hour and a half, I'm going to assume how that conversation is going, what you say, how you say it is going to be different than if your mom or dad called you and said, "Hey, how was work, Camille?" Right? And so that's what I say when you go to work. You're going to have to play with that and decide what layers of work are comforting for you to show up in. But I do not think that we are in a stage in capitalism right now where you showing up as the person that you are with your best friend in the whole wide world. I do not think that's going to get you paid. And that's a controversial statement, but that is 100% my truth, especially as a tech executive. So there's that. I think to directly answer your question, Marcella, I would say you have to be very comfortable with people not liking your brand. That's the fun thing about brands. And so I think that's the biggest distillation is that after you do the research, after you decide your 3 to 5 points, after you decide where you want to showcase this brand on the internet, and then also after you decide how you want to perform this brand at work, right? Um, you're going to have to be very comfortable with people not liking it and more hurtful people letting you know in very creative, direct ways that they do not like it. That is one of the hardest things about being strategic about your brand. And my advice to that is one, they're going to talk about you anyway. So
Yep.
whether you're strategic or not, right? And two, just because someone doesn't like your brand does not mean that your brand is not fantastic, right? I always tell folks that I am not everybody's cup of tea, but I am someone's glass of champagne. And I want to be in the champagne tax bracket. So y'all can keep this chamomile. I want Don Perignon, right? And just know that. Just know that there are going to be people who are going to critique your brand, who are going to critique you, who are going to call you everything but a child of God, okay? Who are going to talk about you behind your back. But if you build your brand from within, if you can look in the mirror and say, but this is who I am and this is who I want to be, it is much easier to deal with the naysayers. And many times that's just completely ignoring them. But just be prepared for that. If you have a strong brand and if you are killing it at work, and if people are talking wonderful things about you, there are going to be more people who are going to talk hate. And that is okay. Keep going.
I love that. Yeah, and I said this not here, but in another call, and I'm just gonna bring it up. Usually, that when folks are bringing up that hatefulness, it comes from a wounded hate spot. So no matter what you do, there's going to be someone that's going to have a negative, and it's not for you to trash your brand. It's more for you to reevaluate of how to respond in the aspect of your brand. So, for example, this past week or two, I've been doing kind of a recap of my life within the last year on my podcast, and on the audio, I would send it over to my bestie. Um, and my main question to her was, is this on brand? So the way you speak, the way you handle negative things, the way you talk about wounds that you may have, you also want to like go ahead and present it from the branding perspective. Going back to the original question, like 3 tips or tricks that you can start doing. Of course, the research. Rihanna's another one that's my bread and butter. We have the same birthday. We're birthday twins, off by a few years. But look at people that you admire. Figure out what it is you like about their brand and how they present themselves. Then go ahead and look at yourself. Look at colors you wear. Color is another big one. Color has this whole psychology behind it. So for me, my colors, I have to shrink my colors, but it's like red, black, white, pink, yellow, and purple. So one way to really start this too is to go into figure out your colors, go to your closet, and get rid of anything that does not match the brand. And I have my girlfriends come in and help me with this. And this way you can kind of start presenting and going into that flow of your colors and your branding. And then there might be pieces that are off brand, but they're just super cute that you want to keep, and that's totally fine. But look at yourself, going back to like asking your friends and family, asking your colleagues, and creating uh, an overall brand, but then of course like the brand in work, the brand outside of work. If you're new into the fields, and you don't have that professional work life yet, go and ask some of your colleagues, your professors, for those 3 to 5 bullets that they can help qualify or explain how you are, and you get to choose. The other one too is if you use ChatGPT a lot, ChatGPT, and you have it learn about you can ask ChatGPT, can you describe what my brand is? And start from there and modify from there so it's who you are. Um, and then just start experimenting. Like the first time you go and you publish this out and you start working on your brand, you're going to start not liking things, you're going to tweak it. So it is an iterative process and it's going to change as you grow and learn. And especially as, like for me, the first time I started doing this, I was looking for a security engineer job. Then I was looking for an open source project to run. So it was just, and then I was looking for a security architect. So every time I had to rechange my career focus, I had to rebrand myself into the position that I wanted. And depending on the spaces that you're in, whether it's Instagram, you want to be an influencer, that's going to have its brand. On LinkedIn, your professional is going to have a piece of your brand, but it should all kind of flow together to the ultimate you.
Yeah, thank you both. It's been really, really just, I don't know, I've appreciated everything. So, um, yeah, I'd like to open it up to questions or kind of more open discussion. Um, yeah, if there's anything else you want to add, or anybody else in the audience or on the call who wants to share experiences, thoughts, tips, questions, this is the time. Maybe I'll start with a follow-up question. So, um, I think you already touched on this a little bit, but are you ever really done building your brand, right? Um, the answer seems like it's no. But I guess how if someone is just starting to think about this, you know, is it really just about when it feels right to you? That's when you have found it. How often do you sort of reevaluate? Is it a constant reevaluation? Um, yeah.
Okay, so I think I'm done building my brand. Well, I'll take it back. I think I'm done defining my brand. I am very happy and at peace with what my brand is. I will never be done tweaking it, experimenting with that definition. But as far as that definition, I am very happy and at peace with what that definition is, right? I am a jack of all trades, operational person. I started my career um, in engineering and hated it and was like, I will never work with engineers ever again. And then if you want to make the ancestors laugh, tell them your plan. Because now I'm back working with engineers, but I spent the rest of my career working in like policy, legal compliancy space, right? And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to make people safe on the internet. I want to have hard conversations when bad things happen with tech companies. I want to be able to respond and things of that nature, and like I always say like be in the room where it happens in my Hamilton voice. An opportunity came up to do that in engineering recently when I joined Microsoft. And the only reason why I took it was one, it was AI. And two, I was working for someone who I really, really love and allows me to be me in my real, most authentic self. And I love that. especially as a dark-skinned Black woman in white America. I'm like, this is great. We could be bagging groceries. I'm gonna show up. Right. But as far as defining my brand as this candid person, as someone who gets things done, as someone who can move things from one end to the other, and as someone who can lead people and make the team feel good while we are doing something hard, that is something that I defined in my 20s. I think I'm done defining that. I love those things about me. I want to continue those things about me. It's fine to it's fine to say that you are done defining a brand. What is not fine is saying, I am done playing with that definition, because your definition can look differently thousands of ways. And then, as you also personally, as you grow up and you live more life and you have more experiences, that definition will not change, but it will just look different. So, a good example, I think the biggest life changing thing I had earlier this year was I had a baby. And let me tell you, like the Lexi pre baby is not the Lexi right now. Not a good or bad thing, just a different thing. And I'm currently trying to actively figure out what that same definition of my brand looks like now that I'm a mother to a bougie Black fairy from Wakanda disguised as a little girl, right? And so that's what I mean when I'm saying you're not done with your brand. I think that it's fine to say I'm done defining it. Here are the principles and the pillars that I stand on and that I always want to stand on. I think that what that looks like and how that's performed and how that's twerked and how that is verbalized will evolve. It should evolve because you are evolving. Similarly, I also think that it is fine to build and define a brand on Monday and then burn it down on Tuesday because it no longer suits you. And so I do want to give you that flexibility. So as you walk in this world and as you better know yourself, every day you get to wake up and you get to know yourself a little bit more. If the brand that you were developing a year ago no longer suits the self that you are, it is totally okay to burn it down. Scorch the earth with it. I give you permission and start all over. Yeah.
Always wise wisdom from you. Um, yeah, so I think for me, like my 5 pillars, which are like my 5 points, um, they're kind of predefined. If I stop doing jujitsu, I would have to change that. If I stop doing cybersecurity, I'll have to change it, right? That would be the only reason I would change my 5 bullets, my 5 pillars. My why, I've seen my why change over the years, but usually it's after big life events, right? So, before I went through personal stuff, my why was totally different than what it is now. And then once I went through it, it became another focus that brought in the 5 pillars. So fundamentally, the foundation of my brand is set, but just as Lexi says, it's going to be a continuous iterative process that I'm going to be tweaking. My colors might change. I might not like pink anymore, and I'm just going to go full on green for some reason. But that just changes as life goes. And then we
Yeah,
have a
thank you.
question on the chat.
There is a question. Yeah, I'll read it out. It's from Karen. Um, how do you see your brand transforming into AI agents or personas?
Ooh.
Y'all need to be careful with that as a person who actually works in AI. And here's why: AI is a tool. And people are forgetting that as we build AI. And I think fundamentally we need to utilize the tool. And as a person who works in AI, I think the tool is very fascinating and can do some pretty cool things. I also think it can be very detrimental. So I work in a space where I'm like, how can we make sure that the goods of AI are out there to everyone and accessible to everyone? And how can we make sure that we have policies, engineering, rules in place that we don't use it for bad? AI is a tool. I'm very old school. I do not recommend trying to build a brand. I do not think your brand or persona should change because AI exists. I think that you should be building your brand with or without AI, right? And then figuring out how to use AI as a tool to better support your brand, to grow your brand, and things like that. I would be very careful with using an AI persona as your brand because guess what? In 20 years, it's no longer going to be AI. It's going to be a new thing. And what are you going to do? You want to have a professional brand that can stand the test of time, and that starts with you. You want to use all this new sexy technology to help and support that brand. But if that goes away tomorrow, you're still good. And that's my advice.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Lexi said is your brand should be separate from these AI agents and personas, and used to push your brand and make your brand more powerful. As somebody that doesn't, my face is all over the internet now, but a few years ago, if I didn't want my face and we had AI personas, that would be something that I could leverage after looking at all the privacy and security settings that they have to make sure they don't own my brand. You have to read those fine prints because even if you use the agents, if in the fine print says that anything that you create here is their intellectual property, you've lost your brand. And that's a whole other legal battle.
Yeah, thank you. It's uh, without derailing the entire conversation towards AI, I find it to be it is kind of for a lot of people, it's a very revolutionary technology. I think that's how I want to say that. And so like it brings about all of these like not only technical questions, but very social and philosophical questions that we really need to grapple with. And so I appreciate both of you kind of sharing your perspective on that. The next question in the chat is from Camille. Um, do you feel like you have to have different social media accounts, professional versus personal, to make sure that you have control over your brand? Um, I love that Jasenia is able to blend a hobby that she loves into her brand, is what the comment says at the end.
Yeah, I'll start off with this one. My LinkedIn looks completely different than my Instagram. My Instagram is more on my personal life. Right now, the healing journey. I talk more about my competitions. I talk more about the training I go through competitions. I share more of my personal life. On LinkedIn, it's more of my successes, my accomplishments. And I throw jujitsu in there because it's part of me. It's part of what makes me a leader, and it's part of what makes me a resilient cybersecurity professional. And I, for years, saw a blend as a security professional, as a martial artist, of how these two kind of come together, and they're a big mindset. And I'm not going to share more of my TED talk, but next year we're manifesting for it. But I have different for those two because some things that I'll be posting, like breath work that I did, I'm not going to post that on LinkedIn. Like, I don't need my coworkers seeing me go through such an intimate process.
As a person who has worked for Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, at different points in my life, and this is just a personal thing, I just happen to be a very private person. Like I have family members that don't know that I'm married or had a kid yet, right? So that's just me as a Capricorn. I'm just more of a private person. Anything that I put on the internet, um, I am cool with the person who writes my check to see it. I'm cool with my mother seeing it. I'm cool with my husband seeing it. And in 50 years, I'll probably be cool with my kid being like, Mom, really? And that's just my personal rule of how I live my life as a person on the internet. I think that you should build these rules for you, which is, Camille, why I love your question. It is clear that Yesenia and I do it differently, and that doesn't mean that either of them are wrong. You should do them based on your comfort level. But if you ask me, yes, I do have a personal Instagram. It happens to be public. And the reason why is that anything on that Instagram, I'm cool with all of those people in my life seeing, and I stand 10 toes down in it, whether you like it or not. Right. I do know plenty of people that have different ways of doing that. And they're like, I don't want you to see me half naked at the Rihanna concert. So I'm going to privatize that information. I'm the kind of person that, like, even if I'm half naked at a Rihanna concert, that picture's not going to go on the internet ever, regardless. Right. So you have to do what is in your best interest, what you feel comfortable doing, right? Going back to like, who are you? Are you doing your work to define your life for you? And then again, using the social media as a tool to do whatever you want with it that aligns to these like life policies or life rules that you have set for yourself.
Yeah, thank you. That the whole privacy aspect resonates a lot with me as well. To just add a data point, right? Like I stick, like my LinkedIn is purely professional. Sure, I could share personal things on there, and some things I just don't want my coworkers and random colleagues knowing. Um, I have how should I say, like a special email address for my Instagram account. So it is public, but it is not an email address that my husband doesn't even know that address. So like, um, it's so that people can't find me using an email contact they know. Um, and that's very personal. So there are a lot of tricks, I think, to sort of separating your online personas, if you will, and your online brand. Uh, yeah, I appreciated hearing a bunch of different approaches. Um, yeah, see, we have about 10 minutes. So, are there any more questions?
Yeah, this is Karen. It's an interesting discussion. As I said in the post on the chat, I'm a retiree, so I've worked my whole career in open source. I'm a developer. But about 10 years ago, I got heavily involved with AI. And I am now one of the AI experts on ISO and IEEE, as well as doing SPDX, a build of materials for work with the Linux Foundation. But having said that, I mean, you do know, I mean, I just want to point out that even if you're trying to keep your life private, right now, all your data, I mean, these LLMs know everything about you. I'm sorry. And doing those little tricks are great to keep your information hidden from humans. But unfortunately, the technology is gaining a lot about you. So just wanted to point that out. You know, we're entering a new world and as I say, I'm working right now with IEEE on a AI agent or partnership type personas and what are the regulations and sort of where are the harms that can happen. But I think more and more we're going to have to think of the digital world as our brands are getting out there. I mean, myself, I was one of millions of open source developers. So my brand was I was a woman.
Yeah, and it can be simple as that. Like mine too is just Latina. That's something else you'll see on my LinkedIn and the emphasis of, my heritage.
I also just want to like two snaps and a clap for Karen for president. Like what she said was very impactful. And I think because of the places that I've worked at and being in the rooms with what data looks like in the privacy settings and also being in the room, literally watching companies look at your data, I think that's why I have been so private. And when I say the word private, again, the information that I put on the internet, I am comfortable with everyone seeing, interpreting, including an AI agent, right? There's a lot of stuff that I do not put on the internet because of that. But like, I just cannot stress enough, do it wisely and make the best decision for you. I also want to comment on Camille's comment where Camille, you said, being private hurts me more at times. I'm a very private person. You can ask my parents. Growing up, they'd be like, "We have no idea what's going on in this 5-year-old's mind," right? And I would keep it to myself. What I recommend is that I'm going to be very frank with you. In this day and age, in the corporate world, people do not like working with private people. It's weird that people think that they can have agency over your thoughts and feelings and minds and passions. I think it's the weirdest thing. But let me give you a tip on how to work in the capitalistic space that we're in that I do not like, which is I had to learn very quickly that I had to actively decide here are some authentic things about me that I'm more than happy to share. I have no problem going to work and being like, I love shoes because I do, right? I have no problem going to work talking about my dog because he's fantastic, right? I have no problem going to work and talking about a concert that I went to. Great. I have no problem coming to work talking about cooking. Great. There are thousands and thousands of things about me that I just don't bring up. And so my recommendation for folks who are very private and think that it sometimes hurts them more than it helps them Don't give people the world. The beautiful thing about privacy is that, just like sexuality, it is a spectrum. So you can decide, here are the thousands of things that I'm going to be private on, and here are the 3 things that I'm more than happy to talk about at all times. Like, I have somebody that I work with, they love their goldfish. All we talk about is their goldfish. Love them dearly, do not care about this goldfish. But it's very clear that they have decided that this is a layer of them that they're more than comfortable talking about. I'm sure this person has so many other wonderful things about them other than this goldfish, but they lean into that. And as a person who, game keeps game, I'm like, I think you're a private person. And I think that you've decided that the goldfish is one thing that I'm totally willing to entertain publicly. And this other stuff, I'm not comfortable with you sharing. So that's my recommendation to you. I'm sorry for being long-winded, but privacy can hurt you in capitalism when it comes to getting jobs, when it comes to building a team culture. People will say things on your review or say things to your manager like, yo, I just don't know Yesenia. And that just gives me a lot of discomfort. Do I think that's appropriate? I don't. Does it happen? It does. And so the advice that I was giving very early in my career was, Lexi, just find a few things about you that you are very comfortable in people knowing. And I was like, oh, I have a dog. Oh, I like shoes. And I just kept it moving. And I've just ridden that wave ever since. And so that's my advice to you.
Yeah, there's some things that I just don't post, like even on social, even on these things where you won't see anything about my family, you won't see anything about more internal personal things. You won't see any of my properties. Like there's just things that you keep to yourself, but like jujitsu in a male dominated field, when I walk into a room and I'm like, oh, I do jujitsu, it kind of comes with a command presence in some aspects because they're like, oh shit, she can kick my ass. And I'm like, yes, I can. So that's one of the reasons also I kind of posted on LinkedIn, is to be like, oh, she's a martial artist. Let's be nice to her. Um, but yeah, I definitely echo that, and just be private in what you want to be private on, but just have a few things that you can connect with people, because it really helps build your network. It helps when you share some personal stuff on LinkedIn. Like on my LinkedIn, you can see that I like Legos, you see that I'm Latina, you see that I do open source. And it helps when like recruiters are looking for folks that matching those job descriptions that they're looking to like fill. It helps starting those conversations on a human level, and that's a huge thing that's an issue within the hiring process, is that most people want to send you emails or DMs, very robotic, like, "Hey, I saw this position, help me." It's like, I'm a person, talk to me like a person. Let's have an actual conversation about Legos, Deadpool, whatever. Um, but if you don't provide that, they can't connect with you, and that's on a human level.
Yeah, thank you both. I almost feel like we ought to have like a whole separate office hours on privacy and online presence. Um, but so with a couple minutes left, what are sort of some things you wish you would have known, or some gotchas about brand building and job searching that you yeah, you sort of looking back say, oh wow, if I hadn't done X, or if I had done Y, like things might have been easier or not as hard, right? Is there anything you can think of, sort of final words that you want to share?
I think we've definitely touched on it, but just to like reiterate it again, it is very important for your brand to reflect you, because when you start putting things out there, so if and I'm being very jovial right now, but if you're like, I can bake the best cake ever, and you actually hate baking, that's not going to serve you. And I realized very on in my brand definition and creation that I really had to stand very deeply and soulfully in the things that I'm putting out there. And so, for example, I do a lot of like LinkedIn posting about career development. The number of times that I will draft something at 2 a.m., because I'm a new mom, so I'm up at 2 a.m. And then I won't post it for weeks, because not because I don't like what I wrote, but because I'm trying to make sure that it aligns to the brand that I want to put out there. When you put something out into the world, even if it's not the internet, even if it's at work, be prepared that people are going to take that the way that it's put out. And so um, I cannot highlight and feature enough the importance of you. You can't build a successful brand if you don't do the work to know yourself, because you do not want a situation where you put something out there that you may not be 100% comfortable with, or maybe not even be 80% comfortable with. And then you have to roll it back. And that's the worst thing for a brand. So really do the work. I think that we're in this age of digital media where everyone has a brand, and people are so caught up on like, what do I put on the internet so I stay relevant, that they're not actually taking the time and the energy to say, am I comfortable with this? And I would rather you build a lifelong brand where you're not posting every day and you're not talking every day, but you're being very intentional about the behaviors, the performance, and the words that you're putting out there, because that'll stay with you forever. So just be very intentional, be very mindful. And to do that, that starts with really knowing you and respecting you.
Yeah, continuing with the intention, for me, it was originally when the question was posed, I was thinking a goal for your brand, right? When I initially started, my goal for my brand was for the next role, because I was using my brand to look for the next job. So have kind of like a goal and intention for it. Like, what is it that you are looking for an outcome of it? Do you want to just grow your network? Do you want to connect with more like-minded, uh, brown and, brown and black folks that are in the cyber field? Do you want to connect with more Latinos? Do you just want to connect with everyone? Do you not want to connect with anyone? Do you want to go hiding under a rock? What is your goal for your brand? And then use that, set your intention, and move forward. And like as we mentioned before, it could always change.
Thank you. I want to be respectful of your time. So let's thank Lexi and Jasenia for all of the great things you shared today. Thank you so much, really. This has been awesome, and I hope to see you back at some point.
Yeah.
um,
Thank you, Lexi. Thank you, Marcella.
yeah, have a great rest of your day. This will be
You as well.
posted, I think, in a couple hours on LinkedIn, so I'll share a link on the Slack.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
have a good one. Thank you.